Elena's daughter was 7 years old when she thought about giving her away. Not in anger, not in cruelty, but in the quiet, terrible logic of a woman who had been abandoned at 2 and believed, with the certainty of lived experience, that some mothers were merciful when they left. The paperwork had been sitting on her kitchen table for 3 weeks. Adoption agency, preliminary intake forms, a checklist of reasons a child might be better served elsewhere. Unable to provide stable housing, history of mental health challenges, recent separation from co-parent. She'd checked 2 of the 3 boxes. The apartment was stable enough, small but clean. It was the other things that weren't stable. The panic attacks that folded her in half on the bathroom floor while her daughter knocked softly from the other side of the door, asking if she was okay in her careful, knowing voice. The depression that made getting out of bed feel like lifting the ceiling with her bare hands. The grinding fear that she was breaking her the way her own mother had broken her. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with the slow damage of a woman who had tried, failed, and finally chosen not to try at all. Her mother had given her up at 2. Elena had no memory of her face, only the aftermath. Foster homes, then adoption by a couple who did their best and still couldn't fill the place where a mother should have been. 33 years. One question she'd never stopped asking. Why wasn't I worth staying for? Now she stood at her own kitchen table with a pen in her hand, on the edge of handing her daughter the same question to carry. This is different, the rational part of her said. You're being honest about your limitations. This is love. The other part, the part that still startled awake from dreams about being left, suspected otherwise. She couldn't be sure anymore which voice to trust. She put down the pen. She looked at the paperwork, at the refrigerator door covered in her daughter's drawings. A yellow sun with a face, a house with too many windows. 2 figures holding hands, the smaller one labelled Dad in uneven letters, the taller one, Mom. She picked up her keys, left a note for the neighbour watching Iris. Back soon, need air. She drove north. She wasn't sure how she'd decided on north. There was no plan, just the knowledge assembled from fragments of adoption records and one document she'd requested and then couldn't bring herself to read for 6 months. Her birth mother had grown up in a town 2 hours north, in the foothills, at the edge of a state forest that had been old before the town existed. Elena had never gone, had told herself that chasing geography was chasing ghosts, and she had enough ghosts already. But the paperwork was on her table, and something in her chest was pulling north. She drove through the city's dissolving edges, through strip mall sprawl, and then suburb quiet, through the town itself, small, unremarkable, nothing that looked like somewhere a person's history might live. Past the town, onto a county road that narrowed through farmland, and then the farmland gave way to trees. The forest began without ceremony. One moment open fields, the next a wall of Douglas fir and oak so dense the afternoon light turned green. Elena pulled off at a gravel trailhead that appeared around a curve. She sat in the car with the engine off. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't noticed until now. She got out and walked into the trees. The trail was narrow, unmarked past the first quarter-mile. Elena walked without direction, the way she sometimes walked the block at 2 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. The thoughts followed her in. She deserves better. Someone who can get out of bed without it being an act of will. Someone whole. She knew the rhythm of it by now, knew the way it built. Leaving is mercy. Your mother understood that. Maybe she was right. Elena stopped. Not because of a sound or a sight, but a shift in something inside her. The oak was massive, ancient in a way that made the word feel small. Its trunk was wide enough that 3 people linking hands couldn't circle it. The bark so deeply furrowed it held its own weather, shadow and moisture, moss and lichen. Its canopy spread above her, filtering the afternoon light. She sat at the base of the tree, put her back against the bark. Then, because no one was watching, because Iris was 2 hours south, because she had been holding herself together for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to put herself down. She let herself break. Not loudly, just a long exhale that, finally, opened into quiet, helpless weeping. Her shoulders heaved. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I can't do this. I can't be what she needs. I'm so sorry. The words fell into the silence of the forest, and the silence received them. It began with warmth. If you're new here, welcome to Tale Ranch. This is where the human condition is explored through story, tales crafted with care, brought to life through the voice you're hearing now. Subscribe if stories like this one speak to you. The air hadn't changed, but something warm pressed against Eleanor's back. Held there, human, unmistakable. Before she could name it, she knew she was being held. She went very still. It was the least frightened she'd felt in weeks. The feeling of being small and carried, a heartbeat that wasn't her own against her back. Then the smell came. Wood smoke and something floral, cheap soap or shampoo, and underneath it, the smell of someone who had been crying. Something in her chest responded, without knowing why. She knew this smell. She had been 2 years old, pre-language, pre-narrative, not yet able to remember in the way adults do. But the body had its own archive. She felt herself being rocked, gently, almost imperceptibly. And she heard, not with her ears, but with whatever part of her was 2 years old and held in someone's arms. A voice, low, worn thin, broken in places. A voice that held her even as it broke. She pressed her palms flat against the earth. She knew whose voice it was. She had one photograph of her mother, a woman in her early 20s, dark hair, eyes that looked like hers, caught mid-laugh. She'd studied it so many times, she'd stopped seeing it. But the voice she hadn't known she remembered. Her mother had sat against this tree and held her and broken apart. The grief moving through Eleanor's body now was her mother's grief, carried in her before she had words for it. Then, arriving not from outside, but from somewhere below conscious thought, she understood. Her mother had not left because she didn't love her. She had left because she loved her and was drowning, and believed, the way Eleanor has spent 3 weeks believing about herself, that her love wasn't enough to make up for how broken she was. That leaving was mercy. That belief had given Eleanor the wound that had never healed. Not the leaving itself, the logic behind it. 33 years of a child's only available conclusion, she wasn't worth keeping. And now, she was sitting in the same forest, under the same tree, with paperwork on her kitchen table, about to give Iris the same wound, with the same logic wrapped around it. Her mother had sat here and broken apart and still held on, right until the moment she decided she couldn't anymore. The love had been true. The math had been wrong. She stood when the light had gone long and gold. She pressed her palm against the oak's bark for a moment, felt its solidity, the depth of it, then let go. She walked back through the trees in the fading light, and somewhere along the way, the clarity settled. Not a revelation, just a question she turned over quietly. What if staying, even badly, is better than leaving clean? She sat in her car for a while before starting the engine. The trees were dark shapes against a darkening sky. Then, she drove south. Iris was watching from the neighbour's window. She saw her face there as she pulled up, and then she was gone, and a moment later, the front door opened, and she was dashing across the lawn in her socks. Her arms around Elena's waist were fierce, the way children hold, without strategy, without wondering if it's too much. Elena bent over her and held her back. "You were gone for a long time," she said into her jacket. "I know. I'm sorry." Neither of them let go. Eventually, Elena pulled back enough to look at her. Her face was doing the careful thing, trying not to cry and hoping she hadn't noticed. 7 years old and already expert at managing herself around her mother's fragility. That expertise broke Elena's heart more than almost anything. She put her hands on Iris's shoulders. "I need to tell you something true. Can we sit down?" They sat on the front step. Iris tucked herself against her side. "I've been struggling," she said. "Not body sick, brain sick. The kind where everything feels too heavy, and I get scared for no reason, and sometimes I can't make myself do what I need to do. I know you've seen it." Iris was very still. "I got so worried that my being sick was hurting you, that I thought maybe you'd be better off with someone who wasn't. Someone who could do everything right." The quality of her stillness changed. "You were going to leave?" Her voice was very small. "I thought it would be better for you. I was wrong." She turned to look at Elena, past the careful thing, into something unguarded. Elena held herself steady against the weight of it. "Don't leave," she said. "Please don't leave." "I'm not. I'm going to get help. Doctors, medicine, people who understand brain sick. Some days I'll still struggle, but I'm going to be here every day because you're worth staying for. You have always been worth staying for. A beat of quiet. Then, are you scared? Yes. Of what? Of not being enough, she said. My mum left me when I was very little, much younger than you. And I spent a long time thinking it meant something was wrong with me, that I wasn't worth staying for. When I got scared about being sick, that old feeling came back and told me the same story about you. Iris thought about this with the sidelong seriousness she brought to things that mattered. But she was wrong, she said. Your mum, you were worth it. Yes. And I'm worth it? Yes, completely. She leaned her head against Elena's arm. Elena felt the tension go out of her, and then out of herself. Not all of it, not the illness or the work ahead, but something. Some knotted thing releasing. They sat on the step until the streetlights came on. That night, Elena fed the paperwork to the small fireplace, one page at a time. She put Iris to bed, stood in the doorway of her room, and watched her breathe. She called a therapist the next morning. Started medication 2 weeks later for depression and anxiety, now named for what it is. Joined a support group for single mothers, which she hated at first, and then, slowly, didn't. It didn't fix everything. The panic attacks still came, but she learned to move through them without disappearing. To reach for the phone before she broke, rather than after. She stopped hiding the hard days from Iris and let her see them plainly. Named, managed, survivable. Not performance, just reality, in her size. Three months later, Eleanor told Iris they were taking a drive. She wanted to know where. She said north, into the hills. There was a forest she wanted to show her. Iris received this with the enthusiasm she brought to most things, immediate, total, and expressed primarily through questions. Will we see animals? Maybe. Probably squirrels. I want to see a bear. You don't want to see a bear. She considered this for a while. I want to see a bear from far away. That's more reasonable. Iris watched the city give way to suburbs and then to open road, narrating small observations as they occurred to her. A red barn, a funny-shaped cloud, a field that looked like it went on forever. Eleanor drove and listened, offering just enough to keep her going. The hills rose ahead of them, green against a pale sky. She thought about her mother sitting in the dark with a small child in her arms, the forest around them, the weight of a decision no one could unmake. She thought about the love in it, real, certain, wrong in its conclusion. She thought about how the same grief, carried forward without a name, had nearly made her repeat it. Iris was still talking. Something about bears, and then about whether forests had names, and then about sandwiches, whether they had brought any, and if not, why not, and whether this could be corrected before they arrived. Eleanor glanced at her. Her face was turned to the window, tracking the landscape as it moved. She had almost given this up. This specific thing, the ordinary noise of her beside her. Her company in a car on a Tuesday. The long, unplanned afternoon ahead. She kept her eyes on the road and let the feeling settle into something quiet. The trees rose up ahead of them, dense and green. Waiting.